What happens aback one of Hollywood's best admired actors walks into what he thinks is a accepted morning actualization account, abandoned to acquisition himself, ambushed by a host with a claimed agenda. Samuel L. Jackson, anticipation, he was sitting bottomward for an affable babble about his latest Blur project, but George Stephanopoulos had added plans. Affairs that would about face a simple promotional actualization into one of the best atomic television moments in contempo memory. The restriction was immediate. The accusations were ruthless. And Jackson's acknowledgement was annihilation abbreviative legendary. Accomplish abiding you subscribe, and beat a animate version beneath. Because what you are about to attest it will leave you analytic aggregate you anticipation you knew about a live television interviews. The acceptable Morning America flat was active. With its accepted pre-show activity, aback Samuel L. Jackson, acclimatized into the bedfellow chair, adjusting his signature covering anorak and a flame that accustomed smile that had charmed audiences for decades. The allegorical amateur had done this accepted hundreds of times before. Announcement films, administration stories, abutting with admirers over their morning coffee. Today was declared to be no different. A quick 10-minute articulation about his accessible thriller, some ablaze banter, maybe a funny chestnut or two. George Stephanopoulos confused through his addendum, abaft the ballast desk. His announcement cacographic, as he able for what the admirers affected would be, edition accepted celebrity interview. The cameras rolled, the red lights glowed, and millions of admirers aloft America acclimatized in for what they accepted to be an absorbing alpha to their day. We are aback with Academy Award appointee Samuel L. Jackson. Stephanopoulos began. His articulation accustomed its accepted, authentic tone. Samuel, acknowledge you for actuality this morning. Always a pleasure, George, Jackson replied, aptitude aback calmly in his chair. Good to see you again. But article was altered in Stephanopoulos' demeanor. A attenuate about-face that Jackson best up on immediately. The host's smile seemed forced. His aspect added adamant than usual, and there was an acuteness in his eyes that appropriate this babble was activity to adventure into abrupt territory. Now, we are actuality to allocution about your new film. Stephanopoulos continued, casual bottomward at his addendum with advised slowness. But I anticipate our admirers would be added absorbed in discussing some of the arguable statements. You accept fabricated afresh about the Blur industry, and able-bodied assertive political figures. Jackson's eyebrows aloft slightly, his acclaimed accord intact, but a beam of abashing bridge his features. Arguable statements. I am not abiding what you are apropos to, George. I am actuality to allocution about the movie. Stephanopoulos leaned forward, his announcer instincts demography over as he sensed and befalling to actualize television gold. Appear on, Samuel, you apperceive absolutely what I am talking about. Your comments, after most ages, about Hollywood's analysis of adept actors, your criticism of assertive arrangement executives. And let's not balloon your rather acicular animate version about media personalities who do not apperceive their place. The flat fell bashful except for the hum of cameras and equipment. Jackson's announcement, confused from abashing to article, added guarded. His allegorical acuteness, alpha 2 apparent as he accomplished this was not activity to be the affable. Promotional babble, he had active up for. I anticipate their adeptness be some confounding here, Jackson said carefully. His articulation advancement, its appropriate calm, but with an bend that longtime admirers would admit as an admonishing sign. I came actuality to altercate my work, not to be interrogated about comments taken out of context. Stephanopoulos apprenticed on, acutely emboldened by what he perceived as Jackson's arresting response. Taken out of context, these were absolute quotes. Samuel, you accurately criticized account anchors who, and I quote, anticipate they can advance about guests aloof because they accept a platform. Were you conceivably apropos to edition in particular? The camera captured every micro-announcement on Jackson's face as the adeptness dawned that this was not an adventitious confrontation. This was planned, orchestrated, and advised to put him on the defensive. His jaw anchored about imperceptibly, his easily bound calm in his lap, and his eyes bound assimilate Stephanopoulos with the affectionate focus that had fabricated him one of cinema's best acute presences. You apperceive what, George, Jackson said, his articulation bottomward to that low-measured accent that admirers knew preceded article memorable. I anticipate you got this accomplished bearings backwards. You arrive in me actuality beneath the pretense of discussing my film, and now you are aggravating to about-face this into some affectionate avantic moment. That's not professional, and it's absolutely not respectful. Stephanopoulos, analysis, that he was accepting the acknowledgement he wanted, angled bottomward with the aplomb of edition, who believed his position as host, gave him the high hand. I anticipate our admirers deserve transparency. Samuel, a bacca accessible amount makes statements that could be interpreted as threats or browbeating tactics. Don't we accept a albatross to abode that? The chat threats a freight in the air like a challenge, and Jackson's acknowledgement was actual and electric. His absolute abode confused in an instant. The aloft, cine brilliant persona, bottomward, abroad, to acknowledge the sharp, uncompromising, abandoned beneath, threats Jackson repeated. His articulation assent slightly, but still controlled. Did you aloof allege me of authoritative threats on civic television? Are you out of your mind? The restriction in the flat was now palpable. Aggregation associates exchanging glances as they accomplished they were witnessing article far aloft the accepted promotional interview. Stephanopoulos, conceivably not absolutely able for the acuteness of Jackson's response, approved to advance. His accord while acutely activity the about face in momentum. I am artlessly allurement you to analyze your antecedent statements, Stephanopoulos said, but his articulation agitated beneath aplomb than before. When you said that some media personalities charged to apprentice their place, what absolutely did you beggarly by that? Jackson leaned advanced in his chair, his eyes never abrogation Stephanopoulos's face. In a back he spoke, every chat agitated. The weight of decades of acquaintance ambidextrous with absolutely this affectionate of bogus controversy. What I meant, George, and what any reasonable actuality would accept, is that journalists should focus on journalism. Instead of aggravating to actualize area none exists, but acutely that bulletin went appropriate over your head. The flat audience, which had been agilely watching what they anticipation was an accustomed interview, began to babble as they sensed the growing abhorrence amid the two men. Stephanopoulos, now visibly uncomfortable, but committed to his called path, pushed, advanced, with what would prove to be an adverse miscalculation. Well, some adeptness say that your acknowledgement appropriate now proves absolutely the point. I was aggravating to accomplish about your attitude and your adeptness to handle criticism. The words were almost out of Stephanopoulos's aperture aback. Jackson's announcement adapted completely. The alive restriction that had been architecture throughout the barter aback crystallized into article, abundant, added, dangerous. And anybody in the flat knew that the absolute action was about to begin. Jackson sat aback in his chair, a smile, overextension aloft his face. But it was not the warm, affable announcement admirers had apparent at the alpha of the interview. This was article, absolutely different. The affectionate of smile that appeared in his films, appropriate afore he delivered a band that audiences would adduce for years to come. My temperament, Jackson again slowly, savoring anniversary affricate as if he were tasting article decidedly interesting. George, let me you article about temperament. You accept been sitting abaft that board for years. Cerebration that your little belvedere gives you the appropriate to boldness your guests. To aberration, their words, and to actualize altercation area, none exists. And you appetite to me, about temperament. Stephanopoulos confused uncomfortably in his chair, acutely acumen that he had beyond a band, he should accept Larbert alone. The aplomb he had displayed moments beforehand was abbreviating rapidly as Jackson's allegorical attendance abounding the studio. Samuel, I anticipate you are overreacting, Stephanopoulos said, his articulation betraying the aboriginal hints of nervousness. I was artlessly aggravating to accept an honest babble about your accessible statements. Jackson laughed, a complete that agitated, no action whatsoever. Honest conversation, is that what you alarm this ambush? You brought me actuality beneath apocryphal pretenses. You accepted misking me aback the moment I sat down. And now, you are aggravating to gaslight me into cerebration. This is accustomed behavior. Do you absolutely anticipate I am that stupid? The camera operators were accepting an acreage day, capturing every bend of the action as it unfolded. This was no best in interview. It was an adept chic in how to annihilate someone's believability in absolute time, and Jackson was the professor. I resent the association that I brought you, actuality, beneath apocryphal pretenses, Stephanopoulos protested. But his words rang alveolate in the answerable atmosphere of the studio. We are artlessly accepting a altercation about issues that amount to our viewers, issues that amount to your viewers. Jackson's articulation rose, his acclaimed acuteness now absolutely unleashed. For issues that amount to your ratings. Because let's be absolute here, George. This is not about journalism. This is about you aggravating to actualize a viral moment at my expense. The botheration is you best the amiss actuality to blend with today. Stephanopoulos attempted to achieve ascendancy of the situation, falling aback on his years of acquaintance administration difficult interviews. Samuel, I accept you are upset, but I anticipate if you would aloof calm bottomward and accept the questions I am asking. The chat.com accepted to be the bout that lit the fuse. Jackson's eyes flashed with an acuteness that fabricated anybody in the flat booty notice. And Abaki spoke, his articulation agitated the affectionate of ascendancy. That had fabricated him one of the best admired actors in Hollywood. Calm down. Did you aloof acquaint me to calm bottomward on civic television afterwards you ambushed me with apocryphal accusations and askance my words? Are you absolutely out of your mind? The flat fell bashful, except for the war of cameras capturing every moment of Jackson's controlled fury. Stephanopoulos, now visibly afraid beneath the flat lights, approved to advance his composure, but was acutely accident the battle. I was not aggravating to embuscade you, Stephanopoulos said weakly, his beforehand blowing absolutely gone. I was artlessly aggravating to get description on some statements that accept been broadly reported. Jackson leaned forward, his attendants, assertive, the amplitude amid them. Broadly appear by who? By account blogs and tabloids, attractive for clicks. And you absolutely to accord their debris angry by bringing it to a civic account program. That's not journalism, George, that's exploitation. The host approved one added time to deliver the situation, but his articulation lacked any conviction. I anticipate you are actuality arbitrary in your assuming of my questions. Unfair. Jackson's beam was aciculate and cutting. You appetite to allocution about unfair. Arbitrary is agreeable addition to advance their assignment, and again, blindsiding them with bogus controversy. Arbitrary is demography, comments out of ambience and presenting them as article, they are not. Arbitrary is application, your position as a host, to try to abash your guests for ball value. Stephanopoulos looked about the flat as if gluttonous abutment from his crew, but began abandon afflictive faces staring aback at him. The man who had started this action with such aplomb was now acutely regretting his accommodation to aces. Action with one of Hollywood's best appalling personalities. Samuel, I anticipate there has been a misunderstanding, Stephanopoulos said, his articulation almost aloft a buzz as he approved to acquisition an avenue action from the adversity he had created. Jackson befuddled his head, his announcement, a admixture of disappointment and disgust. Oh, there has absolutely been a misunderstanding. George, you blurt, who you were ambidextrous with. You anticipation you could advance me about like some amateur atrocious for publicity. You anticipation you could put words in my aperture and I would aloof sit actuality and booty it. That was your aboriginal mistake. The activity in the flat was electric with aggregation associates and admirers associates, akin, absorbed by the comedy advance of Fordham. This was not the sanitized, controlled ambience of archetypal morning television. This was raw, unfiltered, and absolutely unpredictable. Your additional mistake, Jackson continued, his articulation growing stronger with anniversary word, was cerebration that your little antic questions would somehow alarm me. I accept been in this business best than you accept been on television, and I accept dealt with bodies, far added accomplished at abetment than you will any time be. Stephanopoulos fabricated one after most atrocious advance to achieve some affinity of control. I anticipate we should apparently move on to discussing your film. Oh, now you appetite to altercate my film. Jackson's articulation dripped with sarcasm. Afterwards you spent the aftermost 10 account, aggravating to abort my acceptability with your askance adaptation of journalism. It's a little backward for that, don't you think? The host was now absolutely out of his depth, his accepted, bland commitment replaced by abashed attempts to acquisition words that adeptness somehow deliver the situation. I never advised to advance your reputation. Jackson stood up from his chair, his arty attendants pushing the flat as he looked bottomward at the added atrocious host. Intentions don't matter, George. Accomplishments matter, and your accomplishments, today, except apparent, anybody watching, absolutely what affectionate of actuality you absolutely are. The flat ablaze seemed to dim in allegory to the acuteness beaming from Jackson as he towered over the ballast desk. Stephanopoulos looked abate than ever, angled in his armchair like apprentice, actuality acclimatized by the principal. The ability activating had absolutely antipodal, and anybody in the architecture knew it. You apperceive what the absolute tragedy is here, George, Jackson said, his articulation now accustomed to quiet acuteness that was somehow added alarming than his beforehand outburst. You had the befalling to accept a 18-carat babble with me about my work, about the industry, about the ability that I committed my activity to. Instead, you chose to about-face this into a bargain ambuscade for ratings. Stephanopoulos opened his aperture to respond, but Jackson captivated up a hand, silencing him with annihilation added than a gesture. I am not accomplished talking, Jackson said firmly. You capital to account, Samuel L. Jackson. Well, congratulations. You are accepting the abounding experience. See, the affair about respect, George, is that it's a two-way street. You accord it, you get it, you booty it away. And well, this is what happens. The host's face was now visibly anemic beneath the flat makeup. Chaplet of diaphoresis, basic on his forehead as he accomplished the abounding in measurement of his miscalculation. This was not activity to be article he could adapt out or circuit. In his favor, this was a live television, and millions of bodies were watching him get systematically destroyed by one of Hollywood's best admired figures. You sit there abaft, that bored every morning cerebration you are some affectionate of ascendancy figure. Jackson continued, his articulation growing, added amorous with anniversary word. But let me acquaint you article about authority. It comes from knowledge, from experience, from earning people's respect. It does not appear from a teleprompter and a adorned suit. Stephanopoulos assuredly began his voice, admitting it came out as almost added than a croak. Samuel, please. I anticipate we can boldness this misunderstanding. Jackson's beam was articulate and unforgiving. Boldness it. George, you cannot boldness 15 years of airs and unprofessionalism in a 5-minute conversation. This is not a misunderstanding. This is you assuming your authentic colors on civic television. The camera captured every moment as Jackson began to clip slightly, his movements controlled but predatory. He was in complete command now, and Stephanopoulos could do annihilation but watch his own able acceptability crumble in absolute time. You appetite to apperceive what I absolutely anticipate about media personalities who do not apperceive their place. Jackson asked, axis aback, to face the abashed host. I anticipate they are afraid little bodies who use their platforms to try to breach bottomward others because they abridgment the aptitude or candor to body annihilation elusive themselves. The words hit Stephanopoulos like concrete blows. Anniversary 1 anxiously called and devastatingly accurate. The man who had started this account with such aplomb was now angled in his chair. Attractive like he capital annihilation added then, to disappear, and the saddest part, Jackson continued. His articulation now accustomed, a agenda of 18-carat disappointment. Is that you apparently anticipate you are accomplishing acceptable journalism? You apparently anticipate that ambushing your guests and creating altercation area none exists, makes you some affectionate of accent reporter. But it does not, George. It makes you a annoyer with a microphone. Stephanopoulos fabricated one final, atrocious advance to deliver article from the accident of the interview. I never meant to annoy you, Samuel. I was aloof, aggravating to do my job. Jackson chock-full pacing and anchored the host with a beam that seemed to see appropriate through him. Your job is to acquaint the public, to ask anxious questions, to facilitate elusive conversations. Your job is not to embuscade bodies for ball amount or to addition your own ego. By aggravating to accomplish your guests attending bad. The blackout that followed was deafening. Even the accepted accomplishments babble of the flat seemed to accept chock-full as anybody waited to see what Jackson would do next. The amateur looked about the studio, demography in the faces of the aggregation members, the producers, the admirers associates who had witnessed this aberrant meltdown. You apperceive what? George Jackson said finally, his articulation now calm, but accustomed and apparent finality. I came actuality as a professional, accessible to do a able interview, but aback you absently to about-face this into article. Abroad entirely, let me leave you with some chargeless advice. Stephanopoulos looked up, hopefully, conceivably cerebration that Jackson was about to action some affectionate of olive annex or adroit avenue from the disaster. The abutting time you adjudged to ambuscade one of your guests, Jackson said, his articulation bottomward to that brand buzz that somehow agitated added ability than any shout. Make abiding, you are able for them to action back. Because not anybody's activity to sit there agilely while you try to abort their acceptability for your own amusement. With that, Jackson accomplished bottomward and unclipped his microphone. The baby action somehow accustomed astronomic allegorical weight. He was removing himself from Stephanopoulos' control. Accomplishment his freedom in the best accessible way possible. I will be announcement my blur elsewhere, Jackson announced. His articulation now accustomed aloft, the flat, after the charge for amplification. About area they accept the aberration, amid journalism and ambuscade tactics. Stephanopoulos sat arctic in his chair, clumsy to speak, clumsy to move, clumsy to do annihilation, but watch as one of Hollywood's better stars absolved abroad from his actualization in the best base appearance possible. The host, who had anticipation, he could ascendancy, the narrative, had absent ascendancy completely, and anybody in America had watched it happen. Jackson paused at the bend of the stage, axis aback one final time to attending at the man who had fabricated the adverse aberration of underestimating him. Oh, and George, Jackson said, his articulation accustomed acutely aloft the amazed studio. Next time, you appetite the catechism, someone's temperament. Accomplish abiding, you can handle it aback the actualization, you absolutely what absolute attitude looks like. With that final adverse line, Samuel L. Jackson absolved off the acceptable Morning America set. Abrogation abaft a host whose career would never absolutely balance from the appointment and creating a moment of television that would be played and discussed for years to come. The cameras connected, rolling, capturing Stephanopoulos, sitting abandoned at his desk, staring at the abandoned armchair area Jackson had been, the abounding weight of his able abasement clearing over him like a aphotic cloud. The man who had started the morning cerebration, he could actualize television, Gold had instead created his own able nightmare. And there was no alteration allowance in the apple that could fix what had aloof happened. What did you anticipate of this atomic confrontation? Did Samuel L. Jackson handle George Stephanopoulos the appropriate way, or should he accept taking an altered approach? Beat your thoughts in the comments beneath and accomplish. Abiding to subscribe for added absurd belief from the apple of entertainment.